Welcome to A Case of the Mondays, a podcast by 3R Strategy where we talk about some of the most pressing issues facing HR professionals and business leaders. From fair treatment of employees to fostering transparency in the workplace, we'll explore how to create an environment where people don't just have to come to work, but want to. So, if you're feeling blue, tune in and join the conversation so you don't end up with a case of the Mondays.
Welcome back to A Case of the Mondays, a podcast by 3R Strategy, a pay and reward consultancy where our vision is to create a future in which organizations take a fair and equitable approach to pay communicated clearly and honestly to their employees. I'm Ramiz Kaleem, your podcast host, and this podcast was set up to discuss all things HR, culture, and leadership. In today's podcast episode, we're discussing what makes a good leader, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to our guest today, Sally Percy, who is an experienced journalist, editor, and author, specializing in leadership and management. Sally is a leadership contributor to Forbes.com and the author of 21st Century Business Icons, The Leaders Who Are Changing the World. Welcome to the podcast, Sally.
Thank you, and thanks very much for having me, Ramiz.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and leadership is a topic that there have been so many books around this topic, and I think it can be difficult to find something that takes a slightly different perspective. And this is something I think a lot of people will find interesting, because you hear about a lot of these leaders in large organizations, and a lot of them have big social media presence as well. But you see these snippets and short videos, but to really get to know them and learn those lessons, I think it's going to be really interesting. And the first thing I really wanted to know was, how did you come up with your list? So was there a common characteristic that you were looking for, and you picked these leaders? Because, for example, when I was writing my book on pay and reward, I remember writing, it was like a brain dump. And then from there, you try and reduce things out. So did you have a list of 100 leaders and then you narrowed it down to 21? What was your process, and how did you pick those leaders?
That is a very good question, because you're right, there are a lot of leaders out there in the world. I think what I was looking for, one thing I was looking for to begin with was leaders who are still alive. I wanted to profile people who feel very current. And I was looking for leaders who did sort of still have some connection with their business. So some of the leaders I profiled have taken a bit of a back seat, like Jeff Bezos, for example, Amazon, he's chair rather than chief executive now, but he's still got a connection there. So I was looking for leaders who maintained a connection with their business. I was also looking for a really diverse range of leaders in terms of things like gender and ethnicity, but also sectors and countries. So what I didn't want was lots of male white leaders in Silicon Valley and nobody else. So I do obviously have some leaders who fit that category, and quite rightly, but I didn't just want only leaders who fitted that category. But I think perhaps the most overwhelming thing I was looking for leaders who had changed the world in some way through their business. That's what I was really looking for, is people that you would think, well, if this person didn't exist, if they hadn't done what they've done, what would our world look like now? So that was quite key. I was also looking for people who had quite interesting personal stories and quite powerful leadership lessons to teach the rest of us. And one thing I think I discovered as I went through was it was much better for me to research entrepreneurs, because they're often more honest about talking about their stories in public. I've got a couple of corporate leaders in there, leaders of big companies, but you often don't sort of manage to find out about them in the same way, and they're quite shielded from, by their PR teams. Whereas entrepreneurs will often kind of put themselves out there, and maybe a little bit controversial even. So, those were the kind of criteria that I was looking for, I would say. But I think the overwhelming thing is people who are changing the world.
Okay. And so thinking about the leaders that you have in your book, do you think that there is a common quality or a characteristic that you think, oh, this is something that I think all of the leaders, all 21 of them have, or are they all, I guess, unique or in their own way, or are they different? Or for example, I remember reading recently around, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article around the number one quality that they found led to exceptional performance from employees, and it was around conscientiousness and being willing to work hard for something. And I don't know how they came up with this, but it was some research that they did. So was there a common quality in these leaders that you think, oh, I think all of them have this quality?
It's interesting you cite that research about conscientiousness, actually, because I've read that too, and I think that's very interesting, and I can believe that's quite true. And I certainly think the leaders I profiled were conscientious, actually, and were prepared to work very hard. I mean, if I was going to bring out any single trait of the leaders that feature in my book, I mean, certainly they do all work very hard, and I think they are conscientious. But the thing I would probably pick out is they have a huge vision. So, and probably that relates to the fact I picked people who I think are changing the world. But all the leaders in my book have this really strong idea about what they want to achieve and why they want to achieve it. And actually, that's quite critical, because it's what means they can bring other people on the journey with them, especially when it comes to hiring talent and attracting people to work for them. I mean, there's a really big theme, I think, that people really want to connect with these people, these entrepreneurs, because they believe in their vision. So I would say that would stand out. I mean, there were other common traits: self-discipline, sense of purpose, passion for what they do, willingness to take risks and to take long-term decisions. But for me, I think the really overarching thing was the vision.
Okay, so I mean that I always reference, and I think a lot of people do as well, Simon Sinek, who talks about your why. And is that what you mean by?
Yeah, I think exactly right. It's the why, and I think beneath each of these stories, there is that why. And sometimes I think we can assume, people want to start successful companies because they want to earn lots of money, but actually, a lot of people who have obviously researched all these things have discovered that the money is the byproduct. And at the heart of it is the desire, is the why, the problem they're going to solve, why they're going to solve it, why they're doing what they're doing. And definitely I felt with the people I profiled, there was a very strong sense of them answering that why question. And that's something I really tried to bring out in the book, really. Why are they doing this?
Okay. Well, so here's the book for anyone who's watching and not listening. And so the book talks, like I said, it's 21st century business icons, the leaders who changed the world, and it's about the lessons that we learn from these leaders. So were there any surprises or unexpected lessons that you learned from any of these leaders that when you were researching into them, that you weren't really expecting?
I mean, I think some of the things, well, I mean, one of the things actually, I discovered was that though they did have a lot of common traits, they also had quite a lot of differences. So I think we can have a perception that leaders are all really extrovert, and that's a false perception. A lot of the leaders in my book quite introverted people. Some of them seem to have quite good people skills. Others are less known for their people skills. So some of them, we associate having good people skills with exceptional leadership. Some people's people skills might seem a little bit more questionable. One of the other things that came through was there was one person, Yvon Chouinard, who founded Patagonia, and he really was quite a reluctant businessman, really. Sort of like, I read his autobiography to write the book, and he even describes himself in it, I think, as a reluctant businessman. It's sort of, he managed to create this massively successful company somehow was really always wishing he was out rock climbing or surfing, I think. So I suppose that guy kind of shows how powerful the why is, really, that you can create such a successful business when, your passion actually is, in many ways, is something else. I think one of the other quite important lessons is actually, though these people are very successful individuals, most of the people in my book are pretty well known, they do rely on other people, for their success. I mean, it is kind of a collective effort, and what a lot of them are quite good at is getting other people to work for them. I think the importance of hard work, and hard work's quite out of fashion, I think, today. It's all about work-life balance and working smarter, not harder, and all those kinds of things. I think the idea that you kind of get ahead in life by working hard is not very fashionable right now. But actually, when you read the book, you can see that that's what's happened. Something else I learned personally as well from doing it was that there's a comparatively small group of people in Silicon Valley, sort of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, who founded eBay, Bill Gates, Sam Altman, and you kind of realise when you research the stories of these people, they're very interconnected with each other, and they might be funding each other's businesses, and Elon Musk was involved in the start of OpenAI, and of course OpenAI now is heavily backed by Microsoft. So I think maybe quite a lot of people in the world aren't aware that there's this very small, influential group of people in Silicon Valley who are really kind of quite instrumental in shaping our entire world. And I wasn't aware of the extent of it until I actually researched my book. So that was something I learned.
Okay, that's it. So I guess it does in some ways come back to the idea of, when you talk about having a vision and a why, is I imagine a lot of people may have a strong vision or a why, but there's two challenges. One is, I think it can be quite difficult to, in a very easy and a concise way, communicate that why to people. And the second is, if you are able to communicate, getting people to invest in you or back you. And so you're saying that the second part is there's a small community. If within that small group, people are coming up with different ideas and visions, they know that they already have a group of people that can invest in them. So, but how important do you think is the first element of the communication? Because you might have some people, and was this within all of these leaders? Do you think that they didn't just have the why, but they were able to communicate that very clearly to their audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, there's one thing having the why, and then there's another thing be able to communicate that why, and then to communicate it so effectively you can scale a business on the size of the people that I founded in the book. And I think with the communicating the why, I think what there is a lot of, first of all, the person's got to have the burning passion within them. So I profiled Whitney Wolfe Herd, who founded Bumble, the dating app. And, she just said she was basically really obsessed with Bumble. These people made their businesses were their lives, they're utterly consumed by them. And then they're very, I think, single-minded about how they communicated it. And, if you look at someone, Jeff Bezos, he's sort of written quite a few things himself that share his thinking. It's not difficult actually to research Jeff Bezos. There's quite a lot of information that even he himself has written. It shows how he thinks about things, his preoccupation with customer service, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of these people, they have very high standards and they are very exacting, and they're very clear about what it is they're trying to achieve. And perhaps to some extent, they are very clear that either you kind of buy into their vision and you join them on the journey, or you don't buy into them and join them on the journey, in which case you may as well go and work somewhere else. So I think there is the genuine passion from the entrepreneur, and then there is that really single-mindedness about achieving that journey and the fact they want people to follow them. And yes, communication skills, about being able to really get that message across so that people, understand what it's all about and buy in. And often it can be about getting a few simple messages across, but very clearly. But I think it always helps, when the business is founded by someone who continues to run the business, because their personal values are coming through all the time and they're kind of being lived. And I mean, I think you see that very much in the culture of entrepreneurial businesses, and that's why you have some very successful examples of them out there.
Okay. I mean, I guess, when you talk about being driven and single-minded, and that could be a disadvantage as well, couldn't it? Because often when you're in that situation, you might think, oh, this my way is the right way, and you stick with it, and often that can lead to failure rather than success. But I guess we don't really hear about those.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were right, and definitely some of the leaders I feature in my book, if you look at sort of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, I mean, nobody says they're easy to people to work for. And they definitely have very strong opinions. And I think you're right. Sometimes, perhaps, if you have too much faith in your own opinions, that can be a problem. I think maybe with the single-mindedness, it maybe isn't just always that they've got all the answer to all the problems, because actually, even if you look at someone like Elon Musk, he's very good at getting talented people to work for him. But maybe it's just more they're single-minded in what they're trying to achieve. I think perhaps is more the thing, that they don't necessarily think they've got the answer to everything, but they are very single-minded about what they want to achieve. And I mean, Elon Musk is a very good example of that. So yeah, I mean, single-mindedness can be a disadvantage if you're not prepared to listen to other people. But then if you're trying to achieve a goal, you do need to be quite determined and persistent. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got one other question in general about leadership, and then maybe we can look at some of the individual leaders and that you've mentioned. And this is around the style of leadership. And often when we think about leadership, we expect that they have to have charisma and they have to go on stage and give these amazing speeches. And but you have somebody like Susan Cain, I don't know if you read Quiet, who talks about introverts, and she also references many leaders that are introverts. I think Bill Gates is an example. So did you find that within your list of leaders, and that there was a split of introverts versus extroverts, and was it very clear, or did you tend to find that the list that you were looking for, people like Elon Musk, they were primarily extroverts, and they wanted to be the focus?
I mean, Elon Musk is an interesting character because, I mean, I personally think he is actually an introvert, but people assume he's an extrovert, is kind of because he's so sort of vocal on social media platforms and things. I mean, having researched him, I actually suspect he's actually an introvert. Jeff Bezos probably, I would say, comes across as an extrovert. I mean, I haven't been able to do personality assessments of all of them. I would say Jeff Bezos seems to be an extrovert, and I would say Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx, I covered her, she seemed to be an extrovert. I actually would say I think most of the leaders in my book are introverts, though. And so in a way, I suppose that shows that you kind of just standing up on stage and doing a very great presentation isn't always enough in life. That can be an advantage, and lots of us are naturally attracted to extroverted people. But actually, I think when I think about the people I profiled in my book, I suspect probably 2/3 of them are introverts. So I would suggest that maybe kind of challenges some of the assumptions that we actually have about leaders.
That's really interesting. Do you think that there's a split between, because you said that most of the leaders in that you looked at were entrepreneurs, for example, rather than in the corporate world. And I wonder if there's a split of that where, I mean, having set up my own business, I think that entrepreneurship suits introverts because it can be very lonely. And I think, as an extrovert, being on your own and not having anyone to bounce ideas off at the start, unless you have other co-founders, um, doesn't necessarily suit them. But our corporate environments are very much tailored towards extroverts. That was one of the things that Susan Cain really pointed out in her book. Um, so do you think that that could be a factor, is because of the type of leaders that you were profiling, that the vast majority of them are introverts because they're entrepreneurs?
Do you know what? I think you're probably right. I hadn't come at it from that angle before, but now I think of it, I think you're right, because I think with introverted people, they kind of have to draw on their inner strength really, and whereas extroverted people getting their energy from other people. And as you say, when you're starting a business and you're trying to kind of get it off the ground, a lot of the time you don't have the luxury of being able to draw the energy of other people. So if you can't draw that energy from within yourself, you're in big trouble. So actually, I think you're probably right. That's kind of got something to do with it. And also perhaps when you're running your own business, you could kind of make the rules, I suppose, and your success is kind of down to you. And actually, you don't have to conform to kind of some of these expectations that might be what in a corporate environment about what a good, in inverted commas, employee looks like. So I think you're probably right there. There's a lot of truth, I think, in that probably entrepreneurship, kind of suits people with more introverted personalities, and that actually people who are more introverted do actually thrive in an entrepreneurial environment.
Okay, so I told my colleagues that I was speaking to you, and they were quite intrigued and interested. And one of my colleagues, Tashdid, he sent in a couple of questions as well. And one of them is about the leaders in your book, and he asked whether the leaders in your book, are they ordered in terms of their influence? So is number one the most influential leader in your book, or is it random?
There's a very interesting question. I'm afraid the answer is very unglamorous, which is that they're in alphabetical order. There's in two sections.
Okay.
So there's established leaders in alphabetical order, and there is a separate section of up and coming leaders, which is in separate alphabetical order. I mean, I would say if there's one leader that perhaps really stands out for me, that would be Elon Musk. And I think he's a very interesting person to profile, and his influence on the world, I think a lot of people underestimate it. They just think he's this sort of annoying man who goes on ranting on Twitter. That's how a lot of people perceive him. But when you actually understand, kind of how many pies he's been involved in, and actually what his businesses do, I think a lot of people in this country don't really know much about SpaceX, for example. But that's a very significant business, and so I think he did really stand out for me, and I did really quite enjoy doing Satoshi Nakamoto and writing about Bitcoin as well. I found that really interesting because there's a bit of a mystery, of who the actual founder is. So sadly, no, they weren't in any particular order of influence. But if I was to pick if I was going to pick the three most influential people in my book, it would probably be Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Satoshi Nakamoto. Unfortunately, they're all men. But it would have been nice if one of the three had been a woman, but that's my honest answer. I would say those were the three most influential.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, I think most people know of the first two leaders that you've mentioned in that list, but I'm not sure many know about Satoshi. And I have to admit, I don't really know much about the world of Bitcoin. And so what was about him that stuck out? And given that that's an industry or an area that actually a lot of people don't know much about or don't get involved in. Why does he feature in your top three?
I think he features in my top three because, I mean, I don't know what the market capitalization of Bitcoin is today, but at the point I read the book, it was higher than Facebook, and it will be higher than that today because Bitcoin price has gone up a lot since then. And we've got this person who came up with the idea, launched it, was very involved in the first couple of years, getting it off the ground, working with all these developers, was always was very careful not to give away his own identity, was always very clear it was a collaborative project, was not confident necessarily it was going to be a success. He then sort of mysteriously just disappeared, announced he was going on to other projects at a point where it was kind of getting off the ground, but it wasn't the phenomenon it is today. And he's just sort of disappeared, and for over a decade now, no one's really, there's not been any genuine sightings of him that anyone's really kind of been able to verify. And I think I was very intrigued by the idea that somebody could start something, as phenomenally successful as Bitcoin. I mean, whatever you think about it, whether you think it's a giant Ponzi scam or the next best thing for investment, it probably is a combination of both. Whatever you think about it, you can't deny that it is this like huge force now in the world. And still nobody actually knows who started it. And so to me, there's something like quite incredible. There's someone could have a vision for something. 2 years or so in, they just like disappear off. And then it just takes on this whole life of its own and becomes this huge phenomenon. And so that's why, and he's never come forward to claim the credit for it. I mean, obviously there have been people who claim to be him, but there's never really been any substantiated proof as to who he is. I mean, in my book, I do outline some of my theories about him, but I don't actually know who he is. I'd love to, but so either he's obviously very modest. He's probably extremely rich, but he's not come to claim the glory, and that takes a huge amount of self-control. I think really not to go around going, I'm the amazing person who had this brainwave. So that's why I find him quite interesting.
So how did you manage to research into him if there's so little information available on him? And I mean, how do we even know that he's responsible for Bitcoin if he's never come out and said anything? So where has this information about him come from?
Well, he published a white paper in 2008, and it was just after the financial crisis. It was just after Lehman Brothers collapsed. So it was just after the start of the financial crisis, really. It was about a month or so after Lehman Brothers collapsed. And he published this white paper launching Bitcoin as this idea. And then he subsequently, he basically invited other developers to work on the project. And for the first couple of years, he interacted with them a lot on the Bitcoin Talk forum. He also shared emails with other developers. So there is that kind of, historical documentary evidence that he was there. Some people think he was more than one person. The person who claimed to be Satoshi was actually a group of people. But I spoke to the editor of Bitcoin magazine, and he believed it was very much one person because of the speed that he used to respond to things and things. So, I mean, definitely the evidence was there that this Satoshi had got it off the ground, and in the first couple of years. And like I say, he disappeared before it became really, really successful. So, he could have gone, and the whole thing could have just like flopped over. Actually, he didn't. It's not like he'd got it up to a billion capitalization, $1 billion capitalization, and vanished. I mean, vanished at a fairly early stage, really, in the project. So, kind of, he obviously really did not want to. He'd obviously felt he'd got it off the ground enough that other people could carry it forward, and he could take a back seat, which is what he then did. Unless, of course, he was because Satoshi's obviously considered to be a pseudonym, so he could also have been another developer who continued to be involved in the project under his real name. So that's quite possible, but I think his association with the start of it, from an evidence point of view, is quite clear.
Okay, that's interesting. So you touched upon this earlier when you talked about Jeff Bezos and almost his obsession with customer service and the customer experience. What do you think are the biggest lessons from him, or how do you think that the way Amazon operate and this obsession on customer has changed the business world in any way, or what was its impact in terms of the customer experience that now organizations create?
Well, I mean, I think, there's certainly several ways. I mean, I definitely think, undoubtedly, he's totally transformed the business world and the retail world, especially in the markets where Amazon operates. It has a substantial presence here in the UK. It's obviously big in the US. It does serve different markets around the world. I mean, I think here it's almost impossible to imagine a world without Amazon now. And you look at the pandemic here in this country, I mean, Amazon was like an essential service. So, it's kind of people, I mean, my own children just think, oh, well, why go to the shop? Just get it on Amazon. So his impact, I think, on the e-commerce space is massive. I mean, in terms of customers, I mean, there is kind of a very high level of, I think he's kind of helped to sort of drive up our expectations of what we should get especially from online retailers. Expect to get, not discounts, we expect to get refunds promptly. There's that whole review thing, where we kind of, this review idea of giving all these really honest reviews and all that kind of thing. I mean, Amazon really helped to pioneer that. So I think he has created an environment where, it's put kind of power in the hand of the customers, and Amazon continues to deliver on that. I mean, obviously, it does create very high standards for other companies to follow, not necessarily companies who've perhaps got his kind of obsessive zeal about customers. But I mean, it's kind of reshaped the environment about what we expect as customers.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you've ever seen, there was this interview where Jeff Bezos was on the David Letterman show, or one of those talk shows, where they're just questioning him and saying, you've been around for 10 years, every year there's a massive loss that you're making. Why do you continue to? And actually, I actually thinking about that interview now, I remember watching that, and he very much came across as an introvert in that interview, and it was almost like he didn't want to be there. He was just answering questions very abruptly. um, do you think that some of these leaders that you researched, that they've changed significantly over the course of them running their business, where they started off in, for example, as real introverts, but now they're complete extroverts, or maybe they're putting on a show because they're expected to?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on whether someone can change from being an introvert to an extrovert, but I suspect most people would probably say that you sort of lead one way or the other, but then you can develop traits. Interestingly, what you said about the corporate environment, I mean, I have had personality tests, and apparently I'm an extroverted person, but that's also defined by not just being around people, but you tend to think as you sort of talk as you think. So sometimes you put your foot in it, you're working out your thoughts as you go along, whereas an introverted person will wait till they've really formed their opinion before they say something. So that can be quite a key determinant of an extrovert person. But But since I've worked for myself, I probably have developed more introverted traits because I work on my own, as you say. I mean, I think with these leaders, it's interesting what you say about Jeff Bezos, actually, and you may well be right. Now, I've said to you earlier, I thought he was an extrovert. Maybe you're right, he's an introvert. But I think you're also right that when you are the chief executive of a company, of a success that Amazon is, you know, you have to, even if you are an introvert, you've got to somehow tap into your inner extrovert and
Hmm.
and kind of you know, put on the show. As you say, you know, you can't, when you're so successful as he is, you know, you can't sit there and just be interviewed and, you know, maybe mind you, what you said, it wasn't actually that engaging, but somehow you've got to try and be engaging, haven't you? You know, you've got to. So I guess they kind of learn the skills, yes, that will make them very successful.
Let's look at a slightly different industry. So the Airbnb founders, where you know, it was a very innovative idea because nobody was really thinking about um, this previously. Do you think that there are lessons for other, because tech is a really growing industry, a lot of people are thinking of other tech ideas. Do you think that there's lessons that other tech startups can learn from the Airbnb founders and in terms of how they build and scale their business? Because again, you know, even in the pandemic, a lot of people were thinking, oh, Airbnb is not going to survive this, but they again came up with other innovative ideas. So what are the lessons that we could learn from that tech startup?
I mean, I think one of the things with the tech startups that profiled, you know, talk about Amazon and Airbnb, we haven't talked about Facebook particularly, but this would also apply to them. One thing people say about them, and I think there is truth in this, is they did benefit from being in the right place at the right time. And I mean, Jeff Bezos saw the opportunity and he thought he could see the internet, even though it was only his early days when he started Amazon, he could see the huge potential. And he jumped on it. And I think probably it's a bit like AI is now. So, you know, in 5 years, we'll probably have these giant AI unicorns around the world because they're in the right place at the right time. So with some of the businesses that I have profiled, I think it would be difficult to ever completely replicate their success because they benefited from that moment of being the right idea in the right time. But I think, though, having said that, still, I mean, Airbnb does have some very good lessons. It's always a very interesting case study, Airbnb. I think it's very led by marketing. Two of the founders, you know, came from kind of a design school background. They had a real, you know, they took a just, you know, design-led user experience focus on what they created with Airbnb. They're also sort of, I think, you know, have this slightly hippie idea of creating this community for everyone all around the world. And, you know, whether you're a host or you're a guest, you're all part of this community. And so it's very much about, and I think that kind of ties into quite a sort of a millennial view of life, you know, creating, it's all about a community. And you know, kind of under that community, you know, you all have rules and obligations, and but at the same time there's kind of like quite a lot of trust there. So, and I think it's kind of very clear about what its purpose is, Airbnb, but at the same time, as you say, during the pandemic, it sort of pivoted to doing these virtual experiences because obviously people couldn't travel anymore. Um, and it does kind of quite a lot of philanthropic work as well, Airbnb, you know, to try and, you know, get housing for refugees and that kind of thing. So I think it's, you know, a lot of its success is really staying true to its purpose, having a real social focus as well, and, you know, the idea of the community and stuff like that. And actually, you know, being able to pivot when things get a little bit difficult during the pandemic. And also kind of, you know, that sort of approach to marketing and design, you know, that it has as well. So those are some of the sort of key things I think I'd pull out with Airbnb.
Because you mentioned timing, because so I guess there's a big element of luck as well, or I mean luck or timing or whatever you want to call it. Because some people would say, oh, there's no luck, you just have to, you know, The timing is the same for everyone. You just implemented the idea. But if you think about that um, idea of timing, which other business or leader stands out in your list to say they were also either quite fortunate or they were just at the right place at the right time, and as a result, the timing was just perfect for them?
I mean, I think the one that would stand out for that one would be the founders of BioNTech, who came up with the COVID-19 vaccine with Pfizer. I mean, no, they were the right company at the right time. If it hadn't been for COVID-19, I wouldn't have even considered them for the book. So, I think that one probably stands out for me in my mind. Facebook was the other example I gave. That was right idea, right time. I mean, I think what these people have in common is, they really saw the opportunity there. So yes, there was luck, but there was also the fact that they were the ones who saw an opportunity and they were the first to seize it. And they scaled and they were able to attract investment, and they were able to get very big very fast, so other people couldn't catch up with them. And it's that sort of first mover advantage that you see with some of those organisations. Airbnb, there were other sort of renting out space kind of websites. Airbnb was not the first, but it just executed it better than anyone else, and it was still sort of fairly early on in the kind of internet revolution. Yeah, I think it's it would be quite challenging now, I think, to create a tech platform from scratch and get it as big as Meta or Amazon. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but tough.
Yeah, it's. I mean, going back to those three leaders, most influential ones that you mentioned, two of them are quite controversial. So, Mark Zuckerberg. Was Mark Zuckerberg in your top three?
He wasn't actually. It's kind of interesting, but actually, I didn't put him in my top three. It's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Satoshi Nakamoto.
Oh,
But yeah,
yes.
you're probably right. Mark Zuckerberg should probably be up there as well.
So Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, I think they're both considered to be highly controversial, and I think, like you were saying, they're probably. I think Elon Musk in particular is probably slightly misunderstood, because I think he's doing a lot of great stuff, but it's just because I would say he's slightly eccentric, and with some of the things he says, it probably annoys people, and you just form a perception of someone. But at the same time, I think I would probably say that they are probably quite ruthless, and with some of these leaders, when you think about the thousands of people that would sometimes get laid off, it's very difficult to make those decisions. So do you think that being ruthless and is, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but is that something that you would find in some of these, not all of them, but like the couple of examples that I mentioned, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk?
Well, I suppose I talked about single-mindedness. I mean, with Elon Musk, I mean, I think he does come across as very ruthless. Mark Zuckerberg, when he's had to lay people off Microsoft, he's actually given really quite personal statements saying this has been a really very difficult, time having to make this kind of decision. I don't personally see him as, I mean, I can see why Elon Musk is seen as quite ruthless. I mean, I think with Mark Zuckerberg, he's just trying to run a very big business, a very complicated business, a business that pushes the boundaries in many ways. And that's what, and it's got all these issues with data, and it's kind of been involved in all sorts of political scandals and all this kind of thing. I think it's a very challenging business to run. I don't know if I see him as a completely ruthless individual, but I think he's obviously capable of taking tough decisions. And I think all the leaders in my book are capable of taking tough decisions, or else they wouldn't be where they are.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk is, he actually has autism spectrum condition, and he's said that. And I think sometimes, when he says some things that can come across as completely and utterly ruthless, I think they're related to that. I mean, I think, he does care massively about what he does. I mean, he can be an immensely hard taskmaster on his staff. I mean, that, from having researched him, people at Tesla production lines particularly had a very tough time over the years. And of course, we saw how many people he got rid of at Twitter. And yes, you can see with everything that happened with Twitter, why people would think he was very ruthless. But I think the reality was, as a business, though, Twitter was really struggling and still appears to be a bit. So he did have to take some very tough decisions. So I think what I would kind of say is, it's that ability to take tough decisions. And I don't think it's possible probably to take tough decisions in life without people perceiving you to be ruthless, really. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't take those tough decisions, actually, even worse things can happen. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think because that's one of the things that I read about is how much money Twitter was losing at the time, and I think I heard that they basically had enough money to pay salaries over the next 3 months or something, or 6 months. And when you talk about those tough decisions, it could be a case of, we either need to lay off, X number of people, or potentially everyone could lose their jobs because the company's going to go bust. So um, I think that's one of the tough things about these leaders is people don't always get to see that side, and they just make that assumption that they're heartless if you're making these tough choices.
Yeah.
Um, the the world of business, I guess, is changing a lot, and from traditional organizations, we're now seeing influencers and social media um, personalities, and I guess the one person that sticks out, and I have to admit, I didn't even know his real name, Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast. So could you tell us a bit about him? Because he seems to be someone that all of a sudden has just become this massive online personality. And, um, for a lot of people, it's really hard to imagine how somebody could just become a billionaire from doing online videos.
Yeah, well, I know. I had it before I wrote the book. I had not actually heard of Mr. Beast, but I thought to myself there must be some kind of influencer when I was researching possible leaders. So, I was like researching who's the most followed on YouTube, who's the most followed on Instagram, that kind of thing. And I came across him, and I discovered that though I hadn't heard about Mr. Beast, my kids had heard all about Mr. Beast. And so they were able to show me some of his sort of death-defying stunts that he does. And I think one of the things that, basically influencers can have a bit of a bad name. Everyone thinks, oh, well, you just, get your phone out and take a video of you dancing stupidly for 30 seconds and then you're going to go viral and become famous. And actually, when you look at Mr. Beast, he's spent over 10 years getting to where he is today. He was a very young teenager. I think he was about 13 when he started doing his videos. I think he's now about 26. And he spent years honing his craft, doing videos after video. It started off, I think, just doing sort of videos about computer games, and then he sort of moved into some of his little stunts and things. And he it's many years of hard graft actually to get to kind of where he is, and fundamentally he's an entertainer, really. I mean, some things. I mean, it's just kind of. I think he like buries himself alive and goes to the North Pole and pushes human endurance, and people were just like really intrigued by that, and they kind of, and you know, a huge amount of planning goes into it. I mean, each of those stunts costs them a real fortune. So, I mean, I think if you kind of think of him as kind of basically a new entertainment channel rather than as as an influencer, which has got a slightly kind of you know, negative connotations. I think if we think of him as an online entertainment channel, then kind of we can get a better idea of why he's so successful. I mean, in a way, he's kind of like the modern version of a movie star, really, in his own way. You know, to the generation of, you know, teenagers and whatever that are out there and love him. So yeah, it's just a case of thinking differently about him.
So then, why do you think he's having such an impact, and why is he in your list of the business icons? Rather, because if you say we could describe him as sort of a movie star, would we necessarily have a movie star in a business icon list? But he feels slightly different because of he's not just a celebrity; he's making a lot of money. Um, but why do you think he's having such an impact? Is it because of his celebrity status, or because he does a lot of charity work as well?
Yeah,
So where do
yeah,
you think
he
his
does a
impact
lot
is
of
greatest?
charity. I mean, and in fact, I think the first video he did that ever went viral was he got sponsorship, $10,000 of sponsorship, and then he went outside and gave it to a homeless man, and then he got someone filming him doing that, and then it just, that's how he kind of
Hmm.
went nuts. And some of his videos show him giving life-changing tips to waitresses and stuff in restaurants. So yes, I think there is that social side with him that does appeal to people. The idea that he just goes around, waves a magic wand. He's like a modern day fairy godmother, you know, goes away and waves a magic wand, and, you know, makes people very well off overnight. Um, but I think he is a businessman. I mean, he's involved in, it's basically YouTube is his business. And it's kind of, I mean, he kind of, you know, there's sponsorship. He's kind of involved, I think, in, you know, he's launched food brands, involved in launching a restaurant chain. So he's kind of got various sort of sub franchises, and you know, he had a team of people working for him, his crew, who've helped him on all his videos and things. So yes, kind of is like a movie star, but in a sort of very commercial sort of a way, really. So I don't know. You know, I could feature movies. I could have featured a movie star. There are a few people around, sort of, you know, Jessica Alba and her baby products or something. I could have picked a movie star who's also doing business. So I think, you know, you can
Hmm.
be an entertainer and a business person. And I wanted to, because I wanted to include people from diverse range of sectors. I really liked the idea of involving someone who was an entertainer
Hmm.
and someone who was kind of artistic and creative in the book. So that's quite why I included him, and he, you know, he is so successful.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I really liked seeing him in there. Not because I really follow him or I know that much about him, but I do feel like there is. I mean, he obviously has a massive following online, and there's so much stuff that you can follow. And like you said about when you talk about influencers, but it feels like he's trying to do a lot of things in a positive way. And so, if there are going to be young people going online and um, being influenced by someone, it feels like these are the sort of messages that you should be influenced by rather than some other things that you might see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Um,
true. He is kind of quite positive, generally speaking. He's not completely without
hmm,
controversy, but most people think he's quite a
hmm.
positive influence.
So I guess to sum up, I would, if you were to pick one, or say the most important lessons that readers can gain from learning about these 21st century business icons, what would that most important lesson be?
I think it's to go back and to what we talked about earlier about the why. The why has to be really strong and sort of really powerful and really authentic. And it's not enough to kind of just come up with a why. It really has to be the why. And if you kind of want to make a success of something in life, whatever it is, that why needs to be really strong within you. And you need to be able to kind of articulate it. So I think that would be my most powerful lesson.
Okay, thanks. If anyone wants to get a copy of the book, where's the best place to get it, and how can people connect with you?
Well, you can get the book from Amazon, and unsurprisingly, you can also get it directly from the Kogan page website. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can follow me on Twitter. Oh no, now known as X. Twitter now known as X.
Okay, so buy the book on Amazon and connect with you on Twitter or X. Is that why Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are included in your book?
No, I just thought, to be honest, I didn't think you could write a book without having those two in.
Yeah. No, I agree. So thanks a lot, Sally, for all your insights. And like I said, it's a really interesting book and a different perspective on leadership. I think people always like to read case studies. They like to see what's happening in practice rather than just looking at theory. So I would highly recommend getting a copy of the book. And thanks again, Sally, for joining us on this podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you or you'll hear from us on next episode of A Case of the Mondays.